You be around like this. What you said, man? Who's Polymer? Why are you saying hi to him? Get over it. Get over it. That was pretty yesterday. That was not too far over here. No, because I finished it like yesterday at like 10.
Okay, it's okay. I'm not.
Yeah, I didn't give his credit. I actually told him it's only give you credit. I was like, we told him. I was like, give her half credit. Oh shit. It's the Gatorade I got.
Right. Good morning, kids. Oh, rude. Again, good morning, kids. Thank you. How are you today?
Good.
Good? So children, again, reminder, next week is your class. Okay? Next week is your class. For you children, it's gonna be on Tuesday. So please make sure that you study. It is going to be questions and then the FRQ. The FRQ is going to be focused on SCOTUS. Well, obviously the entire class is going to be focused on SCOTUS, but please make sure that you review the cases. Your keyword, the definitions are due today. Please don't forget to turn them in. Do not forget to turn it in, okay? It does lock today. I think it locks tomorrow. But if you do not turn it in today, it is considered late. So I do take off points. Be sure to turn it in. Okay, please. Alright, so today we have kind of a packed day. So we're gonna be starting off with notes. So if you haven't already, please do take out your notebook. You don't need your Chromebook. I don't know why you have it out. Please do put it away. No, you're gonna do it.
What?
What, you thought I was gonna give, no, I'm not gonna give you time. You said you were. Huh?
I remember that.
I said I was gonna give you until tomorrow to turn it in.
I thought this was today. I was like, pictures
Do the definitions. Not right now. Alright, so take out your notebooks, put today's date, we're gonna be taking notes. Wanna take out a highlighter? Alright, title is The Civil Rights Movement. Alright kids, what are civil liberties?
Rights that have been given to you by the Constitution, so you're like, it's like guaranteed.
Very good, what did they start with?
It was freedom of
Very good, what are civil rights?
something you have to fight for.
Yes, usually what group? has
Minority.
Yes. Okay, so we have the civil rights movement, which I am sure that you kids talked about in your US history classes. I am almost positive that you did. You have to. I've done this. So I'm just gonna kind of give you a little overview. So the civil rights movement began around the 1950s here in the United States. Obviously, it has been around for much longer. It really started in the 1940s, but obviously something happened in the 1940s, right? What happened in the 1940s? Yeah, World War II happened. So everyone was focused on killing Nazis. So that kind of derailed really the civil rights movement until the 1950s. A lot of people, a lot of African American people and people of color fought for the country in World War II, and then they came back home and they had no rights. So they were like, okay, that's crap. We literally risked our lives for our country, and we can't even vote. Right? Our people are being killed by the police here in our country, and I just went to go fight for them. So I'm not gonna stand for it anymore. Which is why it picked up speed in the 1950s, especially with the Cold War. Who were we fighting in the Cold War?
Other than ourselves.
The Soviets.
The Soviets, yes. So Soviet Russia at the time, what kind of government did they have? Yes, they had communism, right? And so we were trying to kind of prove how cool we were. And then they were like, oh, so you're so cool. So then why are like most of the people in your country being attacked by the police? You preach equality, and yet you have all of these people who fought for your country and they can't vote. So that's why a lot of white people started saying, oh man, we kind of look bad now. So we have to like focus on the civil rights movement. And it started with this case, Brown v. Board of Education. What happened with this case?
He got rejected because of his race.
No. No. Well, kind of, yeah. There was a little girl, her name was Linda Brown. What did she have to do to go to school? Yeah, she had to walk quite a long time, right, to get to school, because the closest school to her house was only for white people. So this particular court case, what did it do to schools?
Separated.
It desegregated schools, right? So what does that mean? Yes, it was no longer, this is going to be a school for white kids, it's going to be a school for black kids. It was a school for everyone, right? So once this case came forward, then the civil rights movement really started to pick up speed, because they saw it as a win, the first win that they had had since the Civil War. When was the Civil War?
The 1860s.
Yeah, 1865. Okay, we're in the 1950s. Almost 100 years have passed and still nothing has changed. Okay, people are still being killed. So, it really started to pick up speed around the 1960s with the election of which president who got?
JFK.
Yes, and then who came after him?
His vice president.
Huh?
Nixon?
Reagan.
No, it was after, it was the VP of JFK, because he got, right?
Cool. I don't know.
No, no, so it was a J, his last name started with a J, not Jackson.
Lyndon.
Not Jackson. Johnson, Lyndon B. Johnson?
Oh, that guy.
No? That guy? Yeah? The dude from Texas? Really tall dude? No? Okay. So Lyndon B. Johnson came in, and he was like this very tall, very white Texas dude. And all of the racist people were like, sick, he's gonna be with us. He was not, right? He was a big proponent of the civil rights movement. Another very big figure of the civil rights movement was, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which you have to use that nurse. So, what was his previous position before the whole civil rights movement? What was his job? Does anyone know? Yes. Yes, he was a pastor, right? So he essentially did a lot of sermons about the Bible and about what was happening, which is the reason why he was such a great orator. He just knew how to speak in public. I mean, you all know the speech, I Have a Dream, yes? Where did that happen?
DC, Washington.
Very good, on the March on Washington. So, he was really one of the main people who led the peaceful protests against the racial injustice that was being faced by African Americans. One particular woman, however, was the one that really started it. Yes, obviously Linda Brown, because she was a child who was part of the case. But who else? Yes, Rosa Parks. What did she do?
She just sat
She
down.
denied.
She's like, I'm not moving. I am not moving from this spot, right? So she got arrested, right, because she did not move for a white dude. And that's really when people started to come up with different ideas of resisting the discriminational laws that were put into place without any type of violence. Now, was there violence?
Yeah.
Of course, yes. However, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not really want violence, because it just, in his mind, it made the movement look bad. So he was arrested, however, many, many times, for leading protests, for doing a lot of public speaking. And he was arrested in Alabama, specifically the city of Birmingham, which was one of the most dangerous places to be in the South, because the sheriff in Birmingham was a known KKK member.
Wow.
And he was not afraid of straight up leading lynching in the city. Now, we all know what lynching is?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. So, do we know the song Strange Fruit?
Oh, isn't it by the, it's by the girl, the lady?
Yes.
I think I've heard it before.
I believe her name, Etta James? No,
It's not a name.
Eleanor?
Barbara.
This is not Barbara. So, strange fruit, it essentially, the strange fruit is of course the people who are hanging from the trees, because that is what they would do with lynching. They would put a rope around the person's neck, and sometimes, well, a lot of times, they also did this to children, who were, walking to school. The KKK would surround the child, and they would bring the child, they would beat up the child. They would put a rope around the child's neck, they would put it in a car, and they would drag the kid until they reached a particular tree, and then they would string up the child from the tree. And they would wait until the kid died, and then they would just celebrate underneath as the kid was, dead. So that is the strange fruit that was in the particular song. And in Birmingham, Alabama, and in a lot of various cities throughout the South, this is the thing that just happened. And the sheriffs didn't do anything about it, right? Because they were the ones who were actively doing that as well. So, Dr. King, he was arrested in this particular city, and he wrote the letter from Birmingham jail of 1963. A very, very famous letter, because this is kind of what details his philosophy of the protest and of the civil rights movement. Now, his letter was a response to 8 white, of course, fellow clergymen. So these are men of the cloth. You know what that means? Yeah, these were also pastors, right? They are men of the cloth. And they had actually gotten all together, these 8 white dudes, 8 white pastors, and they had written a letter denouncing the civil rights movement and the protests that were going on. They said that it was too much, that it was becoming violent, and they published it in the newspaper on April 13th in the Birmingham News. So, a lot of white people obviously lived in Birmingham as well, and a lot of white people were also very religious. As we know, a lot of people in the South are very religious. A lot of African Americans are very religious. And the church was one of the most important community centers for African Americans at the time, even though, of course, a lot of white people and KKK members would blow up churches, right? They would target churches on purpose, because they knew that this is where a lot of people were meeting up to plan the protests, to plan the sit-ins, to plan the boycotts. So for these people who were also religious to condemn the actions of the civil rights movement, it was like a very big blow to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, because they expected more of the church, because according to them, what does Jesus preach? It's the whole philosophy of Jesus.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness and to love your love.
Neighbor.
Neighbor, but yeah, also your enemy. To love your neighbor. So, they denounced all of the protests that were happening, And the thing that really changed about the civil rights movement, because again, as I said, protests have been going on since the 40s, right? Since before, really. But what new technology did they have in the 1960s and the 1950s that they didn't have before?
Phones.
Something that you look at.
TV.
Glasses,
The television, right? So a lot of these protests were actually aired on TV, which I know for us it's like, okay, because we have phones now, right? They didn't, right? They didn't have any of that. So even though they heard about the protests that were happening, they didn't actually see what the protesters were going through until they finally televised these protests. And what they saw was the African American community protesting, obviously, which is one of our rights. What right is it?
Assembly.
Very good, yes, what amendment? Yeah, First Amendment, right? One of our most important amendments. So there were a lot of people who didn't want these protests to happen, but they did win in the courts. Thankfully, the courts were not filled with racist people. The courts did help out the African American community, and they were like, hey man, they're protesting, that's a right. You know, they can't do that. As long as you have a permit, you can do that. And they did, and they were protesting. And unfortunately for them, a lot of the police, I mean, how do you think the police reacted?
Well, aggressive.
Very, very aggressively, right? And of course, the sheriff of Birmingham, Alabama was the head of the police at the time. So they would use very violent tactics against the protesters. They would have canines just go and just bite the protesters. They would have fire hoses aimed at the protesters. They would beat them up. They would push them with their shields. They would shoot at them, which honestly is not news to us, unfortunately, because that is what they do currently right now. But this was the first time that people were watching it on their television. And they could not believe that the cops were doing this to people who were just standing there. They were not fighting back. So this really kind of, the fact that the white clergyman said this, it took aback a lot of white people, because they were like, wait, I thought that was a good thing. But if my pastor is saying that that's bad, maybe I should kind of rethink my priorities here. So direct action is, instead of just protesting, which obviously protesting, I think that's very important, but you also start marching. You march around your city, you march around your neighborhood. Sit-ins. Sit-ins were incredibly popular with students because there were a lot of diners. And I don't know if you kids remember diners. We know diners, right? Those little jukeboxes with the soda, the root beer. Yeah, okay. We've never watched Grease? No? So those diners, those were only for white people, right? The people of color did not, I mean, they obviously had their own diners, but they did not look like those. They didn't have jukeboxes like the people, the white people did. So they would sit where only white people could sit. And that's all they would do. They would just sit there. They wouldn't do anything. They would just sit there. And the white people got really upset. They would egg these kids. They would beat them up. They would throw milkshakes in their faces. They would call the cops on them. They would do a lot of things. They also did a lot of picketing, which is where you carry the signs around. And they boycotted like buses, businesses, and other stuff like that. So Dr. King obviously was a big advocate for this type of protest throughout the whole civil rights movement. Unlike, of course, the other very famous African American at the time, who was also a leader of his own group, Malcolm X. Yes. What group was he a leader of?
I know.
Huh?
What is
No. That was kind of like his idea of what a city.
What does it start with?
2 words. It's BP. Yes, very good. The Black Panthers. So the Black Panthers were a very different group than the group that Dr. King put forward. They were armed, right? They always wore their black berets, and they would patrol primarily black neighborhoods because cops they would also be in their cars, and they would just get outside, target a group of black people, and just, brutalize them. So whenever anything like that wanted to happen, the Black Panthers would just stand next to the cops with their guns, as a saying, go on, do it. But just know that I have this, okay? Now, obviously, that was a very different approach than the one that Dr. King was advocating for, right?
It's a little more.
They literally had classes where they would get, like, they would go through training to say, look, the police are gonna brutalize you. The people are gonna brutalize you. And you're not going to do anything. You're not gonna yell back. You're not gonna punch back. You are just going to sit there, and unfortunately, you're just gonna have to take it. Because if they see us fighting back, their idea of us is going to be correct, right? So he didn't want that. He wanted the people to see that they were brutalizing peaceful demonstrators, right? Not people who were fighting back. Now, Malcolm X was like, that's crap, right? We're not doing that. And he was all about fighting back. So here we have protests or picketing, and these are the cops with their weapons. This is the actual Birmingham Fire Department, and they would just fire hose the people. And that thing is incredibly strong, and it would actually bruise, and sometimes even crack ribs if you were close enough to the water. The pressure was incredibly high. And they would just mow people down. This was the March on Washington. Yes, it was a lot of people. And these are the sit-ins that I was telling you children about. So these kids, and there were obviously some white people who were like, yeah, this is not right? So they supported the African American community. So that's why you see that these two white people are also being, like, this guy is, I think that's a milkshake or a soda, and he's just like putting it on the girl. And then you see the other people around here, and it would get like this, it would get this top, right? And you couldn't say anything, right? You just have to sit there and just be threatened. And they knew where you lived, right? They knew where your family lived. And a lot of these people, their uncle was part of the KKK, or their dad, or their brother, or they were part of the KKK. And they would sometimes find you. And before they did anything to you, do you know what they would put on your field, on your lawn? A burning cross. They would put a burning cross on your lawn, and when you had that on your lawn, that's when you knew that you were a target. And that either you had to leave or you were gonna get lived.